Live from parts unknown, you're listening to Simon Miller's Pro Wrestling Podcast, the only wrestling podcast on the planet, we think. Sit back, relax, prepare for positivity to run through your veins as Simon Miller gives you your weekly dose of powerful pro wrestling audio. It is Miller Time.
Hello and welcome to Simon Miller's Pro Wrestling Podcast. My name is Simon Miller, and yes, this is indeed a pro wrestling podcast. Hopefully the title gave it away, but if it didn't, well, shrug your shoulders. You've arrived anyway. Thank you to anyone who is new listening this week. A couple of people dropped me a line on my Twitter at Simon316 and said, Simon, I'd never listened to your podcast before. I didn't even know you had a podcast, but I'm so happy to be involved. And let me tell you this, I'm happy to have you here. Again, if you are new, you may need to know the rules. Now, we're actually probably going to have more than 2 podcasts this week because there's so much going on. But yes, I always try and do one on a Wednesday, which you can check out on my YouTube channel or on podcasting apps. But the YouTube channel is youtube.com/The Miller Report Rules. But I also like to get Patreons on to discuss wrestling for 2 reasons. One, these people very nicely support me at patreon.com/Simon316. Wouldn't be able to do the podcast without those people. But 2, having random conversations with people in the wrestling community always, and I mean absolutely always, just goes off in crazy, unexpected directions, and I enjoy that. And that's why I'm very happy to say that this week we have my man Alex on. Alex, how are you this grey, cold morning?
I'm doing good, Simon. How are you today?
I'm very well, man. I was born well, and I'll die well, and I'll annoy a lot of people in between by being way too positive. But no, I'm all good. I'm all good. Dude, thank you very much for being on. And, I mean, look, let's just get started, dude. Here we are. Crazy week in the world of wrestling. Royal Rumble's just gone down. People leaving the WWE, everyone going nuts. Let's not worry about that straight away, though. Tell me, man. Tell me how you got into this crazy sport of pro wrestling. Tell me why you love it so much. Just give me all the information that I need.
Man, I think I'm kind of like everybody else where it's just one of those things back in the day in the 90s when there's a lot of tape trading, a lot of renting videos from like your local video stores and stuff. That's how I got into it. A buddy of mine was like ranting and raving. This is like when I was 96. WrestleMania 12 had just happened and ran and raving about this great Iron Man match. So went over to a buddy's house and watched it. And I watched the Iron Man match, Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, and I was glued to the television. I was so amazed about what I was watching and what I was seeing, and I thought it was the greatest thing, and that's what helped get me hooked. And that's what got me into Bret Hart. That's what got me into the WWE, WWF then, and I loved it. And it's one of those funny things where I really appreciated watching the match, but I didn't appreciate like the greatness of Shawn Michaels because, you know, when you're a kid, you're not as, you know, smarky and, you know, kind of uptight and like they should have did this and they should have done that. But it's one of those things where I wish I had appreciated Shawn Michaels more because I did not like Shawn Michaels in the 90s at all.
I know, yeah. I'm the same, man. Yeah.
And when you're a kid, you don't know that he's, you know, a jerk backstage or he's politicking like crazy or anything like that. You just like, I like Bret Hart. You are not Bret Hart. I don't like you. So it's I just remember watching WrestleMania 12 and just being completely enthralled by it. And at the time, I wasn't able to watch. I didn't have cable. My parents didn't have it. So I was able – you know, you have to hear about this from, like, your friends. And I would always hear about, like, Austin 316 and, you know, the Bulldog couldn't beat Shawn Michaels, the King of the Ring. And it took me a couple of years before I was really starting to get into it because, you know, I didn't have TV. I was able to watch until like right in the heart of the Attitude Era was when I was really able to get into it. And it was so many great memories, so many great childhood memories. And me and my friends, you know, practicing moves in the backyard. And Go ahead.
No, I was going to say the advert didn't work at all, did it? Don't try this at home. Everybody tried it at home. Everybody.
Oh, everyone did. And it was that's part of the reason why I never really got into it, because I remember as a kid later on when the Hardys and Dudleys and Edge of Christian were doing their thing. One of my friends had the bright idea to get a ladder out, and he had a trampoline as well. So he would get up on a ladder and like drop leg drops on everyone. and he dropped one on me, and it hurt so bad, like I couldn't breathe for like 30 seconds. It was a bit of a scary situation.
Yeah.
So,
dude, that sounds terrible. That sounds absolutely awful.
So yeah, please do not try this at home. Simon, you know more than anybody else how dangerous this could be.
I still get the tweets, oh, you injury-prone mother, so on and so forth. I'm like, all right, bro, I just wanted to try something. What do you wrap myself up in cotton wool and never do anything? But yeah, it's all good. I ignore that stuff. And hey, man, that's the best things in life usually come with it some element of risk. That's just the nature of the beast.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
All right, so obviously, so I mean, by what you're saying there, then, are we saying that Bret Hart is your guy? He's the one that, when you get all nostalgic and sort of fuzzy about wrestling, he's the guy that pops into your brain?
Yeah, he was the one that got me into it, and he was the first superstar that I thought, that's my guy. He's awesome. I had the shades. I had like a faux jacket made out of
amazing
cardboard and painted black and pink and all that stuff. It looked quite geeky, but it's such as life.
I'll actually, because that's brought up, I'll reveal a secret that I've never ever told anybody, simply because there was no need to tell it to this point. But when I was a kid, I loved Bret Hart so much, I would lie to people and tell them I had a Hitman leather jacket. Like they want to just lie, I've got one of those. Where did I get it from? I just bought it. Like that's what I used to tell when I was like 6 years old. Just make up that I had one of those jackets. Because I just thought that was a cool thing to say that you had. What an idiot.
I did sort of the same thing because I had a friend who he won some kind of contest and he got like an authentic Bret Hart leather jacket, like signed by Bret Hart.
Oh, that's amazing, that is.
And I was so jealous of him, so I just like got as much cardboard as I can and tried to make it as it looked crap. But when you're a fan and you're jealous of your buddy, you kind of have to do what you have to do, I guess.
Oh, of course. No, of course. It's quite interesting as well that you mentioned the whole thing between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. Because I was at some of the other day, I was at a wrestling event, and people were talking about that. And still, they were saying the same thing, how they grew up during that era. And it almost was like you did pick a side, even before everything in 97. It was like you either were a Bret Hart guy or you were a Shawn Michaels guy. And it kind of took you a few years to process that. And then obviously you realise that they're both just great performers. And yeah, sure, they had backstage, beef with each other, but that's just pro wrestling. It still blows my brain because, in the conversations of best ever, Bret Hart's there, Shawn Michaels there, of course. But in terms of, because, I've been very lucky to do what I do. In my own personal interactions, I got to meet Bret Hart at a WCPW show and he was very kind, very respectful, very nice to me. And yet Shawn Michaels has blocked me on Twitter. For reasons that I still don't know why. I even at one point went back through videos. I've never said anything. A, I don't think Shawn Michaels watches What Culture Wrestling videos. B, I've never said anything bad about him. But it always makes me laugh. Because it's that, it's almost like it's evolved. So when I was a kid, I was a Bret Hart guy, not a Shawn Michaels guy. And now as an adult, I've had a wonderful interaction with Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels blocked me. It's just like, it's come round. It's come home to roost. It's so strange.
I bet if you had the chance to meet Shawn Michaels, he would probably know how awesome of a guy you are. I'm sure he'd unblock you. So
that's very kind, dude. Thank you, man. It makes me laugh, dude. I wore it like a badge of honor when I found out. It was so weird. I was on Squared Circle or something, the Reddit thread, and they had, Shawn Michaels says this. I thought that's an interesting tweet, so I clicked it. It just came up with, "You are blocked." And I was just like, what? Why did I do? And I laughed for ages. Still laughing now. Love it. Okay, so, what do you do in terms of WWE when it's a bit of a boring question, but I still find it interesting. When the whole Montreal screw, because again, this was a conversation I was having. It's all well and good now being these super, intense, nerdy wrestling fans where we know everything, which we do. But when I was a kid, I didn't know what happened at Survivor Series. I was like, I was just like, okay, this feels uncomfortable and it feels weird, but I don't have the knowledge or the maturity to figure out what's gone on. And I carried watching wrestling regardless. Like I have a vivid memory of when D-Generation X brought out the little person, Bret Hart, and being like, this is all so weird. And then I found out he moved to WCW. And I did go check WCW out because of that. But even then I was like, well, I guess that's just the way they decided to do it. I mean, I carried on watching. It didn't stop me watching because, again, I didn't really process the magnitude of the event. But what do you do when the guy that got you into it has this weird, bizarre exit from the company?
I was a kid. I didn't realize what was going on. I remember Bret Hart was always there. He was always wrestling. I mean, he had like a little bit of a hiatus. I think he was acting, and then he came back and had that awesome Austin matches rivalry. It was just, I could go on forever about that. But when Survivor Series happened, I didn't watch it live. Obviously, I had to watch it. You hear about it the next day from friends and stuff, and all the older kids were like, cussing a storm about it. And me as a kid, I'm like, I don't get it. What's going on? He lost the match. He tapped out. I don't get it. What's going on? And then obviously I watch and I'm like, wow, how? And at the time I didn't even, honestly, I was so off from wrestling. Like I was so closed off because it was like Bret Hart's my guy, WWE. That's it. I didn't know there was a WCW. So when he's doing the WCW thing on the pay-per-view, I had no idea what that was or what that meant. And yeah, that got my curiosity going. I'm like, oh, I should check out WCW and see what's going on there. And I watched it and it just wasn't the same for me. What really helped get me into WCW more than anything was Goldberg.
Yeah.
When Goldberg started tearing up mofos left and right and center, that's when I got into WCW, and that's when I really got into it. And it just, even as a kid, I could tell watching WCW with Bret Hart, he was a shell of himself. He was not the same guy. Obviously, you hear, he was heartbroken about the whole thing, and a bunch of personal tragedies happened in his life, and it's sad. But what are you going to do?
Right. I think that's the weird thing with Bret Hart is that 97 event kind of just triggered just this horrible amount of, this horrible chain of events that I don't think anybody could have foreseen coming. And, you wouldn't wish on anybody, let alone someone that, quote unquote, you consider a hero. So, it was very strange. But touching on the Goldberg thing, I mean, I was totally the same. I always flicked between, I was always a WWE guy, but I'd always flick between WWE and WCW because I was just fascinated by what they were doing, especially everything with the NWO. As a guy that was brought up on Hulk Hogan, it took me a while to even process that he'd gone over there. But when Goldberg arrived, I still talk about this today, his push was so good, and he turns up and he's just smashing fools like they're nothing. You're like, well, this is cool. And this is badass. Again, when you're young, you don't know about politics in wrestling or, oh, I don't want to do a job for that guy. All you do is you turn on your TV and you see this jack dude kill people. And you're like, well, he's pretty good. And I don't understand why we don't try and capitalize more on that now. I know you can't do it with everybody. And the guy has to have the right look and, whatever other checkpoint things you need to tick off. But it worked because it was so simple. And yeah, you had to sacrifice some other wrestlers, but I'm pretty sure you could make the argument that people that he went through early on were never going to reach the same, even if they'd done the same with them, they didn't have the intensity or the personality or whatever you call that Goldberg had. Hence why people like your good self was like, oh, who's this guy? I've got to go check him out.
Well, one of the first matches I remember watching of Goldberg was when he took the U.S. title from Raven. That match does not get talked about how great of a crowd that was. If you go back and watch that match, it's just fantastic. It was perfectly booked. It was perfectly, executed. I think at that point he had like 50, 60 wins in a row or whatever.
Kate,
babe. Whatever. And it was just a fantastic match. And I look back on that match fondly because it was just, I thought it was such a great match. The interference from the flock, and he took a headshot from a stop sign, took that off like it was nothing, and then speared the guy, and the place came unglued. And then he lifts up. I can't remember the guy's name. I think it was I don't even remember, but the 500-pound guy from the flock that I think used to be.
Reese, or whatever it was. Yeah, I know who you mean.
Yeah, I think he used to be the Yeti or something.
Yeah, he did something awful, some awful WCW gimmick. Yeah.
He lifts him up. He's like 500-some pounds and jackhammers him. The place is going bananas. And from that point forward, I was like, Goldberg's my guy in WCW. But then also, I'm still watching WWE, and Austin's tearing through the company, and The Rock is having his rise, and Triple H is a great heel, and he's got his new DX, and he's telling everybody to suck it. And what a great time to be a wrestling fan.
I mean, it really was. And the weird thing as well, to this day I still find it baffling, is that, the two top guys in WWE and WCW did look exactly like each other, or at least had similar traits. And I remember all the people at the time going, oh, WCW only did this to try, and I was like, bro, come on, man. You really think that's what they did? They kind of like went to the power plant. Okay, who here looks like Stone Cold Steve Austin? I know, it's just one of those things where I guess it was just of the time. Because, as much, I was always an Austin guy, first and foremost. But I also love Bill Goldberg. But it's like, Goldberg couldn't have done what Austin did, and Austin couldn't have done what Goldberg did, because the way they approached things was just utterly different.
I think they were the yin and yang of each other.
Absolutely.
They both came up and both got hot they were at the right places at the right time. And it was just lightning in a bottle, especially for WCW, who, they basically relied on WWE guys coming in. They didn't have any homegrown talent. And Goldberg was the big homegrown guy that really helped them and helped take them off. And obviously they screwed that up, but what are you going to do?
Well, that's the thing I always find crazy, because I again, always a WWE guy at heart, but I really liked WCW. Like, I really, really did. I enjoyed the competition. I enjoyed guys jumping back and forth to each of the products. And yeah, some of the things that they were doing over there were really good, such as Goldberg. And that's why I never understood why there was this. I mean, I get it now because of, people don't like new guys coming in and getting pushed. It's as simple as that. But, just from a management point of view, like Vince McMahon would never have let this happen. And that's why, we're all quick to criticize and, come up with, Vince McMahon does. But yeah, back in the day, and to this day, Vince McMahon runs a tight ship. And if he was running all that stuff with WCW, I don't think what have happened ever would. And that's why I find it crazy when, again, you look at the boom of Goldberg, somebody that absolutely reignited interest in that product as the NWO were falling off, gave them their second win. Really, if they had done it right, probably would have cemented the company for another, who knows, however long. And if you say that he blew up in, I don't even know what his debut was. I'm going to say 97, but that seems too early. 98? I can't remember. But let's say 98. But if he comes in 98, I mean, he's gone by, it was 97. He's gone by, I mean, the company's dead by 2001, and Goldberg's already, lost his momentum within a year.
By late 2000, because
absolutely, yeah.
And yeah, he came and he faded fast. And because, like you said, it was so simple for him, it was simple in execution, and he took off like a rocket, and he unfortunately exploded like a rocket. And it's what's funny to me is in today's wrestling, you have all these guys that are, especially with all the news with Ambrose and Hideo Itami's been released, and I always wanted to ask, like, do you think we're in the middle of another boom period, or we're getting close? Because to me, think about this. When Ted bought WCW, it was late 80s, I believe, and they didn't really start taking off until a bunch of things started happening. Like, they get Nitro deal, NWO, and then Goldberg, and Sting's obviously a big star. It took years for them to really get into a quote-unquote boom period. Do you think this is something that with AEW and New Japan is popular now? Do you think we need to be a little more patient with this being another boom period?
Yeah, I do. I just think the environment is so different nowadays. I was having this conversation with somebody recently on the podcast that's going to air soon too. To me, AEW has already been a success for all the reasons you've just mentioned. I know that Itami is apparently going back to Japan, but still, I'm sure just the environment in general outside of WWE made him more confident that he could get away with leaving. And, the Dean Ambrose stuff, all the rumors about Chris Jericho and what he's being paid. Apparently, Brock Lesnar having talks with AEW is the craziest thing ever. All of a sudden, there is a viable option backed by people that have money. So even if All Elite Wrestling is dead by 2020 and they couldn't get a TV deal, right now, taking wrestling for what it is, they have created competition. They have created a boom period because people are now confident about leaving. The crazy thing about 2019 is, while I would imagine that social awareness is bigger than it ever has been, interest, if you look at it from traditional metrics such as TV ratings, are down. And so all of a sudden, I understand that's bad for WWE regardless because, they make money off their TV ratings these days. We know that with the deals they've signed for Fox and USA over the next 5 years. But that's why I find it crazy and really difficult to try and figure out what is good and what is not at the moment because there's too many variables. Like you could probably, look at MLW, right? They've basically started a company that relies completely on social media awareness. Like I'm able to watch MLW. They don't do anything over here in the UK. But because I know Court Bauer and I've heard him on wrestling podcasts and I was intrigued to see what he was going to do and I followed him, I then discovered he's doing MLW and Simon Gotch is there doing really cool stuff and blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden, that is a piece of wrestling that I want to watch. And I start saying to myself, again, I'm very lucky to do what I do. Watching wrestling is part of my job. But then I start to think, what actually would I be watching right now if it was just from an entertainment point of view? Because MLW takes up some of my time. If AEW starts running something, that's going to take up my time. New Japan's got me, WWE. I can't watch it all. I think one of the big problems we had with the Royal Rumble right now is that you were asked to watch, what was it, like 12 hours of wrestling? Or more, 15 hours of wrestling in 4 days. Who can do that? Who can absolutely physically do that with a life? Even a kid, even as a kid, there's no way I would have had the time, or my parents would have let me watch 15 hours of wrestling in 4 days. They just wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, I agree. The pay-per-views are long. They're way too long. For me personally, I have to watch them in bits and pieces just because it's too long. But I will say that I definitely make a point to watch the NXT shows, the NXT takeovers, because I love them so much. They're giving me the satisfaction of a great wrestling show and great wrestling matches that unfortunately the main roster and the sports entertainment side is lacking in a lot of ways. Because, for example, we have this great Ciampa Gargano feud. I love it. It's taken me all sorts of ways, and I love it. To me, this rivalry ends with Gargano taking the title from Ciampa.
Yeah.
It has to be. But they took us in such a weird direction because he's turned heel and he's embracing this darker side of himself, and obviously now he beat Ricochet and he's North American champion. I wasn't sure when they were beginning to execute the heel turn for him, but I had faith because NXT's just been a fantastic show consistently. Looking on the other side, Daniel Bryan and AJ Styles, put that on any other card for any other wrestling promotion. You're getting 5, 6, 7-star wrestling matches out of them. You're getting a great story. They completely foiled that as far as I'm concerned because the match, the Royal Rumble match, was just, one, they put it in a dead spot, but also there was just no heat to the match. And then obviously you had a hokey ending with Rowan interfering, and it killed the crowd and it killed the rivalry to me.
Yeah, I agree with you. My problem with the AJ Styles versus Daniel Bryan match, and this is why I'm actually going to watch it this weekend. Again, wrestling nerd. I think it was absolutely destroyed. I think you hit the nail on the head. Positioning destroyed it. No heat because the fans were understandably worn out from the Royal Rumble. Destroyed it. I actually think
they should have put the women's Royal Rumble should have been what closed the show, and you could have put, or at the very least, you should have put the Shane Miz tag team match after that Royal Rumble because it would have had no heat. But that storyline is so goofy and weird that fans need that after such an emotional release of Becky Lynch winning the Royal Rumble.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that would have been a much better way. But I think when I go back to watch it this weekend, I think I'm really going to like the AJ Styles Daniel Bryan match. I think I'm going to have to watch it with sort of other sounds on in the background because the dead crowd will always make you not enjoy something as much. But that goes back to what we're saying about stuff being too long, is that something's going to suffer because it has to. You can't keep a crowd at that level for 6 hours. There's just no way to do it. So yeah, that was my big thing with that. But I will go back and I will see what happens. But that's what I kind of see, with the current WWE and Raw wrestling landscape at the moment, is that you can't predict it. It's unpredictable. Like again, in May 2016, if I had told you that, come this summer, Cody Rhodes is going to be running his second show that he basically put on, you're going to be like, what are you talking about? Cody Rhodes is Stardust. Like, he's not going to go out there and do that. But yeah, he has changed the dynamic. You know, no matter what you think about him as a wrestler, I think he's great personally, but I know some people don't.
He's just like his dad. He's
exactly.
just like Dusty.
He is. And he's obviously inherited some of those traits. And now he's going to try and make a dent in the scene in general. And that's why I'm excited about what we've got at the moment. And I understand, oh yeah, we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves and so on and so forth. But something is happening. At least I hope something is happening. And I think the fact that the guys on the other side of the table are very self-aware, have their heads screwed on like you would want people in that position to, it's not going to be, we talked about WCW, it's not going to be like WCW where the Young Bucks are the tag champions forever or Cody Rhodes are the champion forever. I've got no problem with them crowning themselves for a while, but I ultimately think they'll have stories planned and they'll know when to win them and they'll know when to lose them. I mean, again, I looked it up quickly. Goldberg lost his undefeated streak at Starrcade 98. And really, as soon as he lost that undefeated streak, WCW had no idea what to do with him. So you're talking about,
the finger poke of doom to follow that didn't exactly help matters.
Exactly, right? So it all comes down. So you're literally talking September 22nd, 1997, all the way through to December 27th, 1998. It's not, we'll call it a year. But before then, everything behind the scenes that had brought it down, I don't think we're going to get that. I think obviously social media changes that. But if nothing else, the right guys are in charge of it, which is why I want to see what's going to happen. I really, really do. Like, I'm really fascinated. I mean, again, I don't believe Dean Ambrose would be, true or not, let's say true for now, I don't believe Dean Ambrose would be saying he's going to leave the company if everything outside of WWE wasn't how it currently is. I think that changes everything.
Well, the thing with Ambrose that I find fascinating is he reminds me of CM Punk from a personality standpoint. He seems aloof. He seems kind of introverted and shy. Not to say that any of those traits are a bad thing at all. I'm just saying he likes to keep to himself. You don't really hear too much from all the dirt sheets or whatever about like him and like, what's his relationship like with Renee and all that stuff. Well, you don't hear that stuff. He keeps to himself.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. So Ambrose not re-signing, I mean, I don't think he's going to be like CM Punk and not return to wrestling or anything like that. I do think he'll pop up somewhere else because, I mean, pretty much since the Shield split, it's been a roller coaster for Ambrose. Like, I mean, I'm glad that he was WWE champion. He beat the Shield, but it's just been such a roller coaster because he's been in and out of IC title feuds and doing nothing and then reuniting the Shield those two times that they reunited the Shield, they did nothing for me. They weren't the same because you could clearly tell it was a vehicle to help get Roman cheered, and fans saw right through that, unfortunately. And like you said, you grew up with Hogan, you said, right?
Yep.
I did not. When I first watched Hogan, he was a big baddie NWO guy, and he was hilarious. But I never really got into that, say your prayers and eat your vitamins, because when I was a kid, I was brought up on the Attitude Era, and, it's all attitude and in your face. And when you present this hokey stuff, that's when I turn it off mentally because I don't care. Because part of the reason, like I was going to get to this, that I had a period where I stopped watching, it was a combination of different things that turned me off to wrestling for a period. One was obviously Austin and Rock were gone, because when Bret Hart left, Austin and Rock rose. Those were my guys. Loved those guys. I watched them from 99 to 2003. They were fantastic, and I love what they did for the business.
Yeah.
When they were gone, I'm still watching because they brought Goldberg in, and it started out fine until that Elimination Chamber, and yeah, it just wasn't the same there. And then Lesnar left, and then Eddie Guerrero's champion, awesome. JBL beats him on a technicality. Like, what? And then Benoit was world champion, and he had a lackluster title reign, and Randy Orton took it from him. That didn't help matters. And then John Cena rose and became popular. And I was into John Cena at first. When he's doing the whole Eminem shtick, white rapper gimmick, I thought it was different, but I thought, okay, this is cool. And it was part of the times, and okay, I could get with this. And then he kept winning and winning and winning and winning. And he beat guys that he had no business being in the ring with, like Kurt Angle and Shawn Michaels. I'm like, ugh, I can't. This is not helping. But and then obviously one of the things that I just could not stand for and I couldn't take was when Benoit situation happened. That's what really took me over the edge. I'm like, I need a break for a while.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of people did that because the whole point with wrestling is that it's an escape, right? It sounds so silly to say, but it's true. You watch it because you get dumb entertainment, or however you want to explain it, and you can forget about. It's what fun and entertainment is all about, which is why there was a skit on Raw recently, and I saw loads of people saying, "Oh no, we absolutely should do this because it's reflective of real life." I'm like, no, that's one of the reasons you shouldn't do it. Sometimes people they want to pretend that stuff's not going on. And so when the Benoit thing happened, especially someone that had the reputation to be, well regarded, well respected, pretty much a decent human being all round. I think
as a wrestler, I loved Benoit.
Yeah.
He was another one of my guys. I enjoyed watching his matches. Just from a wrestling standpoint, he was the best wrestler. To me, he was better than Kurt Angle. He was better than Shawn Michaels. He was a better gifted technical wrestler than all of them. But obviously nobody says that because obviously the horrible situation. And I understand that. I completely get it. But for that period of time, he was my guy.
No, and I think I'll talk about that in a second. But you still had thoughts and feelings of him before that happened, right? Like no one sat there and I'm not going to like this man in case he becomes kills his family. Like no one ever had that thought in their head. And I think it was the fact that he did have that kind of relationship with the fans that actually made it twice as shocking. Hence why, when it all goes down, you do think to yourself, maybe, well, I did, like I say, you did as well, I just need to take some time off. And I think Dave Meltzer talked about it in the Wrestling Observer, that apparently that at that period, there was sort of like, is this going to kill everything? Is this going to be the end? Because how on earth can anybody come back to this? How do you carry on when something so much, more important and no prominent has gone down? And that was always the thing. That's always been the thing for me. Again, I know I'm just talking from my own personal point of view, as I always do. But sometimes you see these bizarre, in my opinion, vitriolic arguments. Oh, he should be included in the Hall of Fame. I'm like, no, he shouldn't, man, because some things are just higher up the chain of priorities than being a good pro wrestler. And I understand the stuff with CT, the concussion stuff, and I'm sure that did all play into it. But actions are actions, and sometimes they do have to speak louder than anything else that's happened. Which again.
Think of it this way. Look at all the negative press WWE got with the shows in Saudi Arabia last year.
Well, yeah, exactly. Imagine they go put
put Benoit in the Hall of Fame. You'll multiply that by 1,000.
Yeah, and also it's an insult to the family. It's an insult to the situation. It doesn't mean it's a cut and dry situation where it's again. I understand there are other things that do need to be discussed when you are bringing up Benoit, again, the whole things that he may have been suffering with, but it doesn't take away from what happened. And that always has to be at the center of everything. And yeah, no, I totally get it, man. I didn't watch wrestling for a while after that. I needed a cleanse. I needed a detox, but because pro wrestling somehow...
I did too. And thankfully, some guy from Chicago sat on his knee, sat on the Titantron, sat on the ramp, and cut a pipe bomb and got me right back into it.
Isn't it weird? So what year? Was it literally 2011 then? Was it that long, or were you already kind of dipping your toe back in? Was it 2011? When did he cut that pipe bomb promo? I can't remember now.
2011.
Yeah.
It was. Well, initially, no. It was The Rock came back in 2011.
Yeah.
And when that happened, everyone was reporting on it. Like local news that don't report wrestling at all were reporting The Rock was in this, because I think at the time the Fast 5 movie came out and he kind of revolutionized his career as a Schwarzenegger action guy, and obviously it was a great movie. So when he came back, he's hot off that, I think. So, or he's close to releasing that movie. And, The Rock was my guy, and I knew all the catchphrases, and I practiced the eyebrow, religiously to get it right, and I still can't. So
I taught myself to raise one eyebrow because of The Rock. How stupid is that? It's absolutely ridiculous.
I still can't after all these years. I don't think I have the muscle in my head. I don't know.
Oh, dear.
But when The Rock came back, I got into it, and obviously also he rock bottomed John Cena, and I'm like, yes, thank you very much. But it helped get me into it, and I watched, and it was Punk that really got me back into it because he cut probably one of the best promos I've ever heard in that pipe bomb. It was so fantastic, and it was exactly what he cut to the core of what I thought, and probably what a bunch of other wrestling fans thought that grew out of it, grew up, and grew away from WWE. It's too PG. It's too cookie cutter. We need a dose of realism. We need a dose of that attitude we used to have. I'm not trying to say bra and panties matches. You don't have to bring that back. That's perfectly fine. But that attitude of I'm a wrestler, I'm going to be the top guy, and I'm going to destroy you to get there. We needed that, and Punk absolutely did that. And they screwed that up too, which I'm sure led to him wanting to leave. But Punk was having, obviously, also the fact that Punk was having fantastic matches with Cena. I mean, I couldn't talk enough about that. I mean, it was just fantastic. And then when he left, I watched that whole period from the pipe bomb to when he left, and I still watch today. And I get it. I totally get why he left. I understand why he left. Same thing with Ambrose. He doesn't like the hokey stuff. And towards the end, Punk's in a rivalry with the Authority, and he's having to do comedy. He did a comedy thing in the Rumble match itself. I think he had to avoid. He took a Hurricane Rana from, was it El Torito?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
That's hokey. Why are you giving Punk hokey stuff? Why are you giving Ambrose hokey stuff and spraying Kane and Randy Orton with ketchup and mustard? I mean, come on.
I don't know is the answer to that. Like, someone asked me, I was talking to somebody about wrestling. Starting with the CM Punk thing. Why? I mean, I think there is a very obvious reason, but it's more interesting if I just ask you outright to see what you say. Why do you think WWE treated him? Because I think this ties into Ambrose as well. Why do you think, even with the swell of support and again, bringing people like your good self back into wrestling, which I'm sure showed on the back end, I'm sure they had analytics to say, oh man, that pipe bomb promo, as we know that it did. So why do you think they didn't capitalize on that? And why do you think the CM Punk was always this, in many ways, he was a top tier guy, but he was never the guy?
I truly think that it's just they did not like him personally. And they tell you all the time, all the wrestlers, when they're in interviews, have a relationship with the boss. And I get it. I'm in corporate America. I get it. I totally understand that. But wrestling is not corporate. Well, they're trying to be corporate, and they pretty much are. But it's still like, in a sense, the land of the jungle. The strong survive in the WWE because it's such a taxing business. Punk, I don't think Triple H ever liked him. I think all that stuff about him not liking him, I think are valid. And I don't think Vince kind of liked him because obviously he made him a lot of money at that 2011, 2013 period. But it's just because I don't think they liked him. They kept pushing him down and trying to diffuse the situation because he was such a name when he came from Ring of Honor, and he was the champion, and he had all this buzz about him because I remember that buzz when I was still watching. And they put him in ECW, and he's rising, and he's world champion and IC champ, tag champ, and the Straight Edge Society. You could see over the years him rising and doing it in a way that I think fans appreciate. Fans appreciate a tough journey. That's why we still chant, do the Zack Ryder thing, because we still like Zack Ryder because of all the crap he's been shoveled to him over the years. But obviously with Punk, he touched a very real nerve with fans, and that's why they love him, because he comes off as a jerk, and he doesn't seem like a likable guy, but he does still have a likable quality to him, if that makes sense.
No, I think you're right. Like, I think maybe it's that he's got an edge to him, right? And maybe it's that edge in the world of pro wrestling that worked because people knew that he was real. That's something that I think is missing from WWE. Again, we've talked about scripted promos 1,000 times, but tying it into Raw this week, that promo by Seth Rollins was one of my favorite promos I've seen ever because I could tell he meant it. He didn't say anything. It wasn't like a great segment or a historic segment or anything like that, but it was just a guy who always clearly wanted to be a wrestler, who got to win the Royal Rumble, go on to main event at WrestleMania, even though he probably won't properly main event it, but whatever. And you could just tell it was etched all over his face. Same with Triple H when he came out. And it goes to show how powerful words are. And I think Punk did the same thing. When Punk talked, you were like, well, I'm sure you're setting up an angle because that's what wrestling is. But I also think that you're not saying anything you don't mean deep down. And that's why the Pipe Bomb promo was so good, is that even if it had been meticulously gone through, Punk was like, well, I'm going to read this anyway because I mean it. Like, this has come from my heart. And that is something that we miss in wrestling these days. Same thing with Ronda Rousey. I understand she had all the scribbles, but when she actually cut that promo on Becky Lynch at the end of that segment, pure fire. Because I'm sure she actually thinks that.
Yes,
I'm sure
do more of that.
Yeah, I'm sure she does believe in her legacy, and so she should. She did do that. She did absolutely change, mixed martial arts for female athletes. You can't argue it, because she absolutely did. But tying all this into Dean Ambrose, and this is why I get confused, he was given all the hokey shit to do. Oddly, he was very good at it. Like, while I didn't necessarily like the positions he was put in, I actually always thought Ambrose, like when he dressed up as a Mountie, that was actually, again, the fact I remember it goes to show it must have tickled me to some degree. Again, not necessarily a spot I want to see Dean Ambrose put in, but he was, again, made lemons.
Well, that's the thing, because I remember watching him on the Independents as John Moxley, and he was a Sandman, Stone Cold Steve Austin type killer on the indies.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, my friend of mine asked, they said something about Dean Ambrose in WWE, and I said, go and watch John Moxley. And he said, what's he like? I said, kind of imagine like Stone Cold Steve Austin meets CM Punk, but also a psychopath. It's like, he's this crazy.
He can do funny stuff. I remember he did some kind of blood match in the Independents, and he's like singing Sweet Caroline to the crowd. Like, what is this?
Yeah. Oh, no, he's got layers to him. Absolutely. Yeah, but the question is, I don't think WWE have the same feeling towards Dean Ambrose that they do CM Punk. So why is it that he has been put in these gimmicky angles? Because, he was put in a very difficult and controversial story, given everything that happened with Roman Reigns. And yet then within a month, he is a germaphobe. Do you know what I mean? That's a very strange evolution of that character, given that it starts with, like I say, a very intense and divisive, a divisive storyline. So why is it? Why did WWE decide we'll just make Dean do it? Why can't they go, again, why can't they look into his past and what he did as John Moxley or whatever and kind of go in that direction? That's where I get confused, because he doesn't seem like he's rustled any feathers. The statement WWE put out their website was very nice, very, very kind to him, if anything. Sounds like they'd welcome him back. Again, it could be a work, but who knows?
It was weird that they did that, because they normally don't. Normally, it's the standard after he's been released, we wish you well in your future endeavors, blah, 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 blah. This is weird. This is not something they normally do, so I don't know what the end game is, where people are saying it could be a work. I don't know. If it is a work, bravo, good for you. I'm happy if it is, because I want him to stay, obviously.
Also, I like being worked. Like, I know that sounds ridiculous, but I'm a wrestling fan. Whatever you've got to do to trick me, do it. And if you get me, I'm all right with that. Like, that's the whole point.
Agreed. I don't mind that at all. If it's a work away. Make it a good work. Don't work for the sake of working, which they sometimes do, and it fails miserably. But to answer your question, I don't think they hate Dean Ambrose or whatever his real John Good, I think is his real name.
Is his name? Yeah.
I don't think they dislike him. I just think he keeps to himself, and he doesn't like the hokey stuff, which I'm sure angers writers and whatever. But why they give him all that hokey stuff is because I don't think they're willing to give it to Seth and Dean. I mean, to Seth and Roman, because I think they definitely viewed Roman as the star, and they like Seth a lot too, because I think Triple H has a fondness for him personally, which you could kind of tell in that promo, because Triple H got all choked up too.
Absolutely,
so,
and I got no problem with that, man. Like, you know, let reality slip into my storyline.
I don't either. I have no problem with that. But with Dean, I don't think they view him as a star. I don't know anything about merch sales or what he's done with TV ratings or how his YouTube clips do, like, on views. I don't know anything about that, but I think he's a prideful guy, and he wants what's best for him and his character, because he's got the money. I'm sure WWE pays him very well. I don't think he has to worry about money for the rest of his life, which is good for him. But with that, there's a pride factor to it. And I think he has pride, and he wants to be treated more seriously and not come out dressed like Bane, being a germaphobe. I don't think he wanted to do any of that stuff, and I get it. I totally get it, because it's dumb.
It's very weird. I didn't mind the Bane jacket. I didn't mind the sirens. I didn't mind all his sort of cronies. What I didn't get was
the thing that just turned me off to it.
Yeah, but the thing I really didn't get was, why are you a germaphobe? I don't know. You weren't a germaphobe a week ago, so you know why are you? And also, they clearly gave up on that quite quickly, because where did it go? It didn't go anywhere. He won the Intercontinental title, and they started doing those promos that were kind of shot from the side, and I was like, okay, that's kind of cool, it's kind of different, but yeah, it never really went anywhere, and that's why I never really understood it with Dean Ambrose, because yeah, if you do look at the three members of the Shield, it did always feel a little bit like he was in third place for one reason or the other, and maybe that is because we don't know him, and I would never profess to, but maybe that is because of just the way
which is unfortunate, because he in the original Shield, he had the most character than anyone. He talked more than Seth and Roman, than Dean and Seth and Roman. I'm getting confused. He had more character. He had more character, more personality. He talked more on the mic in the original Shield. So
yeah, he carried it.
I don't get it at all.
No, I mean, I genuinely think it may be, if we are talking again, if he is a little bit keeps to himself and whatever backstage, maybe that's why he never really reached out to the right. I don't know, but I do remember when he won that WWE title at TLC or whatever the hell it was, there was a swell around Dean Ambrose. There was a certain excitement, which obviously carried over as well to Roadblock. Remember Roadblock when he fought Triple H? I remember people were desperate to see Dean Ambrose win that, and I understand why he didn't. It was building to something else, and it was like a bump in the road as they went on to WrestleMania. But there was a certain atmosphere around Dean Ambrose at that point, which I never really felt that WWE capitalized on, which again, I understand. I literally, on another podcast that's going to drop this week, I was having the exact same conversation about Braun Strowman, that when Braun Strowman was on the tipping point, you couldn't do anything with him because the goal at that time was to push Roman Reigns. And I ain't got nothing against that. It's WWE's decision. I know, again, controversial. But I think it was the same with Dean Ambrose. They had a different agenda, and it means when guys have kind of got to that point, naturally and organically, there's that word, you have to jump on it, and if you don't, you will go the other way. And I think that's kind of what happened with Dean. And now he's in a position, what the last rumor I heard was that, and again, this changed very quickly, obviously, but was that he was going to be taken on EC3 at WrestleMania for the IC Championship. And I thought that was okay, but it wasn't really a marquee match.
That's okay, but I mean, it's tough with WrestleMania because there's so much great talent and there's so many great guys and girls out there that you want to see in a prominent spot get an opportunity to steal the show. And Dean is one of them. Absolutely. EC3 for the IC title? Not really. Not for me. Do you think we're going to see Dean again in WWE? Because they obviously made the statement. What do you do with him until his contract expires? Do you still book him prominently on the show?
I don't know, man. I mean, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? It's fascinating for them to announce this so early.
Because he had a little thing with Triple H. I liked the match at Roadblock. I liked when they were the final two in the Royal Rumble years ago. they seem to have good chemistry. I'm all for a match with those two.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's impossible to kind of decipher because it's brand new territory, right? Does he just vanish from television? Does he do his feud with Nia Jax that was teased? You know, is he a backup for?
Don't do that, please.
Is he a backup for? You know, the whole Batista thing, because obviously that was the rumored match with Triple H originally, Triple H versus Batista. Does he kind of get pushed into that spot as well, drafted in? I don't know. I don't know what you do, but if there's no bad blood and you do want to work together again, I don't mind him vanishing from TV. That makes good business sense, right? But, you know, if you job him out for 3 months, then that probably would create a certain, you know, a foible in the relationship, which could come back to haunt them. But yeah, I really don't know. I don't know where it's going to go. You know, even though 95% of me thinks it's real, there is a small sort of wrestling fan part of me that thinks I'm being, you know, have the wool pulled over my eyes. So I'm not giving into it entirely. But yeah, I can't answer that question. But I do think somebody like Dean Ambrose I think Dean Ambrose outside of the WWE is a much bigger star than Dean Ambrose inside the WWE. Because people like us are going to be interested to see where he's going to go. He's not a super big star like a Chris Jericho is in terms of mainstream appeal, I don't think. But I still think he's within that element. I think again, I know loads of casual wrestling fans who will, if he joined AEW, for example, would then want to watch AEW just to see what he's going to do. I do think he has that much of a draw. And obviously, you know, The Shield, much like CM Punk, they did draw a few people back in. Like, The Shield was pretty cool at the time. A lot of people were around for their run, and then they vanished again. So it's incredible that they're not letting him do it, of course. It's just the nature of the beast. But you know, if Dean Ambrose walks into Cody Rhodes', you know, run promotion tomorrow, I think Dean Ambrose is a top guy straight away. You know, it's that weird thing that when you come out the other side of WWE, because you've been on TV, because you've constantly been in the conversation, because you've had world title runs and you've been with The Shield, this huge group, Seth Rollins, you know, Roman Reigns, you have a certain stock to you that, I mean, it will only get you so far. But when you have the talent that Dean Ambrose has, that, you know, has been shown in WWE, but also in the Indies before that, I think he becomes a game changer. He almost does become a Cody Rhodes in that kind of a sense.
I agree. I just think also, and I'm not trying to speak ill of Roman Reigns because I never disliked Roman Reigns, the individual, because he was just pushed down our throats. I want him to tackle and beat leukemia more than anybody else. I want him to live a long, happy life more than anyone else. I'm all for it. But WWE's insistence on pushing him is going. I thought initially it was going to bite them in the butt, and it kind of has, because Brock Lesnar and Seth Rollins, while I'm for that match, I'm sure a lot of people are like, seen it before, don't really care, But then they screwed up Braun Strowman, and now I think because McIntyre didn't win the Rumble, I think he's probably going to be on a bit of a downward spiral because their insistence on pushing Roman. But now with the women, with Becky and Ronda and Charlotte, that to me is those are your next top people. Those are the next top girls that could carry the company, because Becky is just on fire. I mean, that promo with her and Ronda was just money. I loved it. I ate the whole thing up. I loved it. Ronda's promo to begin, it was weird. I think the fans are turning on her.
Sorry,
the fans are turning on her.
Weird. It was weird. I felt sorry for her, but it was weird.
Exactly. I mean, those two, and I'm fine if you add Charlotte to it as well, because I think that puts it over the top, and that's your show closing main event is Becky, Ronda, and Charlotte. If it's just Becky and Ronda, I don't think WWE, or at least I don't think Vince feels that's the show closing main event. So I think, what do you think?
I think you got to go with lightning in the bottle. And for the first time, you know, as opposed to lip service where, you know, WWE says something but it's not true, the women absolutely should main event WrestleMania. And not because they're women, but because they've got the best thing going. And right now they've got the most interesting storylines and they've got the best wrestlers. And they're the people that should always main event your biggest show, as far as I'm concerned. I think if they don't do either a one-on-one or a three-way, I'm happy with either. I've completely bought into this idea that if you do the three-way, you actually will get a better match, and really deep down no one cares as long as Becky wins, which she will. And also, I like the idea, again, Ronda Rousey is already a name. You know, Ronda Rousey is not famous for wrestling. Ronda Rousey is famous because of MMA and everything she's done after that. So I actually think...
Ronda Rousey gets people in the door.
Exactly, yeah. So I think if you are going to do this historic thing, which a main event, you know, featuring at WrestleMania with women is, I think it's nice to get two quote-unquote homegrown talents in there. I actually think Charlotte has been so good that it deserves is a weird word, but she does. She deserves to be in it as far as I'm concerned. I think that's why you put her in it. And I think if WWE ignore this, then they have missed the boat. Like they haven't striked at the right time at all. I don't think you can get to WrestleMania 36. You can get to WrestleMania 36 and try and do it again, and I'm sure it could work depending on what the current lay of the land is. But right now, it does work. I'd love Seth Rollins to beat Brock Lesnar in a really sort of feel-good match, but I don't want to see it as the main event. And I can't even figure out who Daniel Bryan's going to face. But again, I won't need to see that match in the main event because deep down, the way that things are going on TV and just how I feel anyway, I know what I want to see. And what I want to see is, again, a combination of those three women for that title with Becky Lynch winning. And I want to see it go on last, mostly because we haven't had that feel-good moment at WrestleMania for ages. And then, then we can take it from there. I just think that makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, and that's the thing with WrestleManias the last few years. It's just they've all ended on such downers that it hurts, and fans remember that. I mean, like WrestleMania 32 in Dallas, I thought was a great WrestleMania, but because Roman and Triple H went on last in a long match that nobody cared about, it dragged the show down.
Yeah, I think it does.
Yeah, what was it? The year before, Seth Rollins cashed in and won the title. That was a feel-good moment. I loved that moment. That was great.
Yeah.
That's 31. What was that, 4 years ago?
Yeah, it was, man. Yeah. Terrifying, right?
Everything after that, it's been Roman. Roman beats Triple H for the title. Nobody cares. Roman beats The Undertaker. Nobody wanted that at all. Last year, Brock Lesnar beats Roman, and they booked that just because it was so predictable. They wanted to be unpredictable. I mean, and nobody cared about that either. So, yeah, come on. Strike while the iron's hot. You never know. Maybe Vince is so desperate. It's like, hey, Roman, how's the treatment going? You think you can come back for WrestleMania? Maybe.
See, I think even if he was good to go, I would wait. I feel like the card is setting up by itself, and I just think there's more in him coming back. It's the same with Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn. Whoever else you've got, I would just wait till after WrestleMania. You always need that boost. You always need new storylines. You always need new feuds. Again, I feel like I've already got enough investment in this Mania, no matter what direction they're going. I mean, maybe Daniel Bryan needs somebody to go against, so you could introduce one person back. Cena.
I think I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I think it would be an interesting dynamic to see John Cena and this new vegan heel Daniel Bryan have a match. I think that would be interesting because they had a match SummerSlam in 2013. That was a fantastic match.
Yeah, it wasn't. I guess you switched it around a little bit.
I don't see who can challenge him for the title. Do they go all in with Mustafa Ali? Maybe. Do you go with Randy Orton? I don't think a lot of people want to see that. They've done AJ Styles, and I think that should be done and dusted with that rivalry. So who's next?
If you do Cena versus Daniel Bryan, who wins, though?
Bryan. Absolutely. Because Cena, you're right. that carrot of breaking Flair's record is an interesting dynamic, but John Cena is here purely to, one, because I think he still loves the business, but also to put guys over. I personally would rather see John Cena. I think he would do the right thing and let Bryan beat him because that's the right thing to do. And you always put the new guy over. Another thing you could do, and I know this is a crazy idea, but Samoa Joe, those promos are just fire.
Now you're talking, man. It's never going to happen, but man, do I want it.
Turn him babyface and let him go against Bryan.
No, I'd love it. I'll never believe that. I think that they have tagged Samoa Joe. This is his level, for lack of a better term, which is fine. It's their company, but yeah, I love him. I love him. He's brilliant.
which is unfortunate because he always hits it out of the park.
Yeah,
he
always.
got me that up until the match with Brock Lesnar. That build-up was one of the best build-ups I've seen in years.
Oh, man. And yeah, it's because everything Joe says is spot on, right? Absolutely spot on. He is.
And then he chokes out Heyman that nobody saw coming, and it was in such a cool, calculated, serial killer vibe kind of way that was just amazing.
Oh, he's great. He's great. There's no two ways about it. My thing with Cena and Bryan at WrestleMania is I can see somebody backstage pitching, All-American hero John Cena comes back to, slay the environmentalist. I mean, the Daniel Bryan gimmick's hilarious anyway because he's technically the biggest face there is. But I can see that being pitched. But I like it. I think, for me, WrestleMania is half the time just about what's on the paper. What's actually when I look at the card and get excited. And if I see Daniel Bryan versus John Cena for the championship, straight away I'm going to be like, okay, I want to see this because I'm intrigued.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things where it's like, I don't know what you do. Do you hot shot one of these NXT call-ups to have a match with Daniel Bryan? I don't know. I personally would love it. If Aleister Black really is being called up, go all in with him. Go all in with him. Have him feud with Daniel Bryan. I'm all for it. I would love to see Ricochet and Daniel Bryan in a match. That could be fantastic.
Well, dude, that brings us full circle, my friend. Because if they did do that, do you know who it would be like? Bill Goldberg. Go all in. Go. I totally agree with you. Go all in with him. Don't worry about it. Push him to the moon.
With Finn Balor before he got hurt.
Yeah, exactly. Because he comes in. I can work with Kevin Owens, right? Come in, make a splash. I'm all about that. I'm all about that. Always about that. It worked once, and I guarantee it will work pretty much every single time. And if you put some people's noses out of joint, all right. But that's just wrestling for you. That's just the way it goes.
Do it with the right guys. Don't do it with Lars Sullivan. Please don't do it with Lars Sullivan.
Why don't you like Lars Sullivan?
Generic. I mean, look, there's stories about him. He had an anxiety attack, and I wish him well. I don't mean ill will towards him, the individual, but him, the character, don't care for. Remember last year in that fantastic ladder match, he was the only one that was getting booed. He was the only one nobody cared about. Everybody else, Killian Dane, love him. Ricochet, love him. EC3, love him. Adam Cole, love him. I mean, he was the one that you could tell the company are high on because obviously they want to put him with Cena. I don't care, really.
I think I totally see where you're coming from. I need to see how when he eventually gets the main, I need to see how they treat him. Then I'll know. In a few weeks, I'll have an idea because I probably would have said the same thing about Braun Strowman, and he managed to absolutely surprise me. So I tread the boards carefully with Lars Sullivan. But you're right.
I was never on board with Strowman either.
Sorry, man?
I was never on board with Strowman.
Well, even at his height?
Not really.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, it's just a preference, obviously.
Yeah, of course, absolutely, man. Yeah.
I mean, I laughed when he put Owens in the porta potty and tipped it over because, I grew up watching Jackass and that stuff was hilarious to me. So, but, I think the time has come and gone with Strowman. I think he's too much damaged goods to me personally. Honestly, go ahead and put him on SmackDown and put him with Bryan and he can rehabilitate his character.
Wow. Yes. Yeah.
Just do another Wyatt family thing, but instead of like cult New Orleans guys, make them vegans.
Well, I tell you, man, Elimination Chamber. Daniel Bryan retained thanks to Luke Harper. I tell you, I'm calling it now. I'm calling it now. Right.
I'm all for it.
On that note, that hour has just whizzed by. So we will start to round this up. Dude, is there anything else you want to pimp out there, advertise, throw out into the world? Anything you want, you certainly can do.
Nothing really. Just another wrestling fan, and thank you, Simon, for doing what you do. I'm a proud Patreon supporter, and I look forward to more great content in the future.
That's very kind of you, dude. And again, thank you very much for supporting me, man. It really does mean the world. And thank you to everyone that listens each and every week. I'm not that kind of guy that usually pimps his stuff out, but numbers keep going up. And that makes me happy. So thank you so much for everyone that keeps listening. Again, you can watch it all on YouTube, youtube.com/The Miller Report Rules. It's on iTunes, it's on Google, it's on all podcast stores. You just search for Simon as Pro Wrestling Podcast. Come follow me on Twitter, Instagram at SimonRitter316. We talked about the Patreon. On Wednesdays, if you're around 1 p.m. GMT, we always do it live on the YouTube channel as well. But otherwise, look, have lovely weekends. Enjoy anything you've got planned, and I will talk to you all again very soon.